Okay, moving on to tools. In this section I'll give you the need to know on the tools. There's quite a lot involved with tools, and I'll just give you the basic that you actually really need to know. Just want to change one preference, and that is the display of the theme is, I prefer the light version. I find it easier for teaching to differentiate between things in this lighter mode. Everything's still the same. You don't have to change to this if you don't want to, but anyway, just to get on with it. The built-in tools that come with Bluebeam are accessed via toolboxes in the tool chest, via the tools menu under measure, and similarly, if you notice, with measure, all these tools have an icon, and this icon corresponds with the icons down on this particular right hand toolbar. You may have a similar toolbar elsewhere. You can create as many as you want and put them where you want. For the purposes of what we're doing, we're just going to concentrate on the toolboxes in the tool chest. Now, because you've got my profile, you've got several toolboxes that I've created for you that are brickwork specific, and what I'll try to do is explain the differences between how the tools work. Some of them got different properties from others, how to customize the tools, how to make your own tools, manage them, and import them, export them, so on, so forth. So within each of these toolboxes you have different tools. Some of you may have by default these standard ones that ship with Bluebeam, and they're just a series of icons that are pre-designed just for other industries and disciplines to just create quick on the fly markups. If you've still got a lot of these turned on, you can actually get rid of them by going into tool chest, going into manage tool sets, and you can untick the ones you don't want, or you can just again here just untick the ones you don't want. You may also have some tools that appear as a series of symbols. Again, the way to remedy that is to go into the properties icon of the particular toolbox, in this case general measurements, click on the properties and ensure that detail is selected, and that will give you a detail menu rather than icon menu. Now it just so happens that in this general measurements toolbox, these are the general tools that ship as default with Bluebeam. They're also available, as I said, through the measure tab here. All of these icons are greyed out because there's, as you remember, there's nothing in the viewing workspace. So it's pretty obvious what they do. A length is a length. Polyline is a kind of a girth tool. The difference between polyline and actual girth that you would get from the measuring toolbar, which is labelled perimeter, is that the polyline can be broken down into segments and different heights applied to each of those segments. I'll demonstrate that in a minute. Volume's obvious, area is fairly obvious, count is count, and there we have perimeter, and I will demonstrate all these. But these other toolboxes are ones that I've created for you. Obviously you can't have every instance of every type of tool, as you just have nothing but tools and toolboxes, and you wouldn't, so we've gone for the most common types of ones here, and these are created by cloning these original ones, and basically you just duplicate it, and then you tweak the settings and the properties to customize it to your own tools. I'll demonstrate that. It's easier to show you than verbally explain. Right, let's get on with showing you how these work. So we want to get a drawing in. Go for this ground floor plan. Right, so we're in the workspace with the drawing we want to work on. One of these other icons down here that's a really good habit to get into having on as default is this one full page icon. That when it's clicked allows, it sort of scrolls in both directions, X and Y axis, as you're scrolling in using a wheeled mouse, which is quite beneficial to have using Bluebeam. So let's just start by using a basic length tool. What I should start with is calibration. Fundamental part of measuring in Bluebeam is making sure you're in the right scale. So I'll show you how to calibrate. Go up to Tools, go into Measure, pick the Calibrate icon. Dialog window pops up, select 2 points to calibrate the measuring tool, click OK. You're now in calibration mode. Find a dimension you want to copy, and you notice as I get closer to the line on the drawing, the cursor turns into a little square box and it's intelligently grabbing on at the pixels on the screen. That's because we enabled the Snap to menu. This is Snap to content. So click on the first point, go to the termination point. Again, it snaps on. You'll find that it grabs precise pixel as you're using it, and you'll be able to feel it doing it. Double click. That then gives you a pop-up window, and here you input the dimension you measured. Always store the scale in the page. Click OK. And then a good habit to get into, pick your length tool, find another dimension just for comparison, and go in and check that the scale is there or thereabouts. So that line I've been rendered gives me 1.87, 1.865. Now over on this right hand pane you've got a properties toolbar, and on top of the properties you've got the measurement toolbar, and that's got a dialogue in there about the scale, precision, some other information that's not relevant just yet. But if you notice that rendered at 1.87, I've got my precision set to 0.01. If I change that to 0.001, you'll see that that's gone down to the nearest millimetre now. You'd be amazed how accurate it is at these scales. So if you're having problems with tools not measuring the way that you thought they were going to, that's one place to look. Look what happens if I change that precision to 1. That actual dimension we've measured has rounded itself up to 2. So be careful of that. It needs to be as accurate. But generally 0.01 is great for what we need to do. Just expanding on that, so we've used the length tool, and if I go to the select tool and I actually click on the line I've just made, you'll notice if I zoom in that there are these little yellow nodes appear on the tool. These are called control points, and you can actually drag and drop them. Let's create another line. Again, you can see the nodes. If I click in the markups list on a particular entry, you'll see that it corresponds with the line on the screen. See, I'm flicking back between the two, back and forth between the two there. That's handy for when you are measuring and you want to know where you're at. You can find your spot in the drawing by clicking between the two, or you can click on the screen and the corresponding one will light up in the markups list. It can be dragged and dropped to suit. Show you some of these others. Let's go for perimeter, and let's show you how that works. Now with perimeter, you can drag from corner to corner to get your markup. Now obviously we've got some bays here, so what I can then do, just by way of showing you how these tools work, right click a point there, I can add a control point, I can add a further control point, I can then move my line to suit. Now obviously that's not the right way to measure a perimeter, but I'm just demonstrating what the software can do by showing you this. So there, now I'm a little bit more accurate with my my perimeter. I won't do the other bit, it's just for demonstration. But the difference between this kind of perimeter and say the polyline style of perimeter is, with the polyline I can't drag and drop from corner to corner, I have to go from point to point. So I've clicked on the first node, if you like, down to the second node. Let's go right the way around and get our true perimeter. Best to take it fairly steady. You can actually just zoom straight off the screen if you go too fast, and you will have to start again. But as you do this, you'll feel it grabbing at the pixels on the drawing to get a fairly accurate measure. Let's get rid of that perimeter just to, so if I just highlight it or click on it here and just delete it, it's gone. With polyline, as I said, you can, if you zoom in, you'll notice that each section of the actual overall line has got its own individual dimension in it. You'll also notice that in the markups list, each one of those segments has just given you an overall measurement of that 50 down there. With polyline, you can actually zoom into the screen, right click on the line, and if you click the split all option, go back down into the markups list, you'll see that each bay has been given its own section. It's quite a handy tool if you've got different heights. So if you click in the breadth column and input say 1.5 on the first bay, 2.2 on the second bay, 3, you'll notice that the times in column over here has been multiplied the breadth by the measurement in each leg. These breadth and times in columns are custom columns that I've created. They're not Bluebeam default columns, but I'll explain more about how you do that and why we do that in a future lesson. But for now, just take it that they're there for a very good reason. Similarly, because we've created these columns, if you go into the properties of the polyline we're actually using, you'll see that dialog actually appears in there, and a little shortcut which is really beneficial, and bear this in mind, if you grab hold of the remaining polyline lengths that we haven't extended a breadth to, grab the first one and go to the last one holding the shift arrow. So you select them all, and you will find if you go into this section here, you can input the breadth. Say let's go from 2.2, press enter, and it'll extend them all in one go, which is quite handy. Saves you a lot of clicking in screen. One other tip when girthing, I just want to show you, going around the perimeter, same thing applies. Let's just actually show you how you can put that back. If you grab hold of all of these again by holding shift, right click on them and click group, it will put the whole lot back into one measurement. Obviously that breadth won't be entirely correct, but if you've ever got the need to separate things out, that's a way of doing that. Just a little tip, bear that in mind. But let's get rid of that completely and show you that again. So grab polyline again, and we're going again around this perimeter. Just say you scroll too far and you click and you think, oh, hold on, I've clicked, I've gone too far. If you hold Control and Z, it will undo the last click you did. Press it again, it'll undo the previous click. So you can then practically retrace your steps and go back on the correct path. It's a handy hint as well. So just complete that back so it was. Just one other thing I want to show you with poly length. Little measuring tip for future. So again, for whatever reason, you may just be measuring a particular item that you just want to go all the way around and then just remove a part of it. If you do the split all trick again by right clicking, split all, you notice it split them all down. Just so say we wanted to get rid of just this particular part of this bay, you could highlight that particular section and just delete it, and you preserve the rest of it. So you can remove things from polyline as well, which is really handy. As you get the hang of measuring, you'll see the benefit in these tools, or I should say you'll see the benefit in these tips. Let's move on to area. This is the default area tool. Supposing we want to grab hold of this floor space for whatever reason. Doesn't have to be just on plan, you can use it elevationally as well. So I'm just grabbing the floor space of this half of the unit. Final click. Okay, well, you can see what Bluebeam's done there. It's not very helpful, but it's a default setting. When this tool's been created, it's just been given this appearance, and this is an opportunity to explain to you how the properties of each tool work. So by default, that area measurement's been given a fill colour of black. The actual colour, it refers to the line around the shape or the colour of an actual line. So just to change that, if we click on the fill colour and change this to something like yellow, and we can also change the opacity of it, and that's the fill opacity. We can actually take that down so we can actually see through the shape. You can change the width of the line so it's thicker. You can change the colour of the line if you wish. You can change the style of the line. It's your preference, and this is how tools are created. You can set it to show, don't know if you can see that 57 square meters right in the center there. You can turn that off. You can actually turn the segment values on an area as well. Has its benefits, but I don't tend to use them. I'm sure you may find a use for it. Once you've made those changes, you can then proceed to add this new markup, or new tool if you want to call it that, to your new toolboxes, and you do that just by making sure you've got the shape selected, and you can just add it to your tool chest. You can add it to whatever one you deem it necessary to add it to. I try and categorise my toolboxes. For instance, I've got wall types by area. I've then got wall types by girth, depending on how I'm going to measure. And there are brickwork features, there are stones and accessories, openings and accessories. Let's just bung it into my tools for now. So add to tool chest, my tools, set as default, go into my tools, we'll find it's in there as an area. One thing that Bluebeam doesn't explain anywhere, and everyone struggles with this, is I've created this tool and I've put it into my tool chest. Now I want to use it for another measurement. So if I click on that, notice I get just exactly the same as what I've created. And the reason it's doing that is because it's in, if you go into the actual tool, it's in drawing mode. But you can't tell that because the option to change it to properties mode, which is what it should be in, is there by default. So what I've now done is click properties mode, and drawing mode is the only alternative option. It's quite a flaw in Bluebeam that they don't show this. So what happens now is I've got that area that I can make whatever size I like using those properties. So hopefully that makes sense. It's quite important. So that's the main way of creating tools, and effectively what you're doing is you're preserving the original default tools of Bluebeam with their properties. You're cloning it and you're changing the newly created tool to use the properties of an area measurement or the properties of a polyline. Hopefully that makes sense. If I'll answer any questions after this lesson if you need me to expand on that further. Let's just get rid of these other shapes. We'll get rid of that for now. Diameter we'll come on to later. Count, perimeter I've explained. Count is obvious what it does. It counts things. So let's just count, say, these steel hollow sections that we've got on here. 1, 2, 3, 4. And the thing about counting, it doesn't know when you finish counting. It's waiting for you to carry on. So how you get count to render into the markups list is when you finish counting, just change your cursor and just click outside the area, and you'll see count has now appeared. And with count you can do all the same things you could with polyline in terms of splitting them all. I won't go over that again, but there's also a handy option of resuming the count as well in this menu. So if you right click on one of the counts, you can split all and do like I showed you before with polyline, or you can resume the count, so it puts you back into the tool. So suppose we had another couple of win posts over this side, you can see the increase of the count is going up. And again, to finish counting, click outside and the count is increased. A little bit confusing count, but it's just one of the little niggly things you'll get used to. One other way to create tools as well on the fly, which is probably the most simple way, is if you just want to create a very similar tool, just right click the tool you want to duplicate and just duplicate it, and then just edit it. Just you call that 2 brick wall in stretcher bond, whatever you want to call it. Just press enter, highlight it, go over to the properties pane on this side, change it to a different colour. You can actually add hatchings. Let's put a brick one on that. Change the fill colour, and you can see the icon over here is changing. If I actually render the tool now, you'll see it's slightly different. Again, any changes you make, just go up to profiles, save your profile when you are creating tools. As I explained before, you'll come back to the next session and they won't be there unless you save your profile. Just to finish up on tools, as you know, you've got the default built-in Bluebeam tools, and a lot of people just use these and nothing else. I prefer the approach of having all the different toolboxes that are pretty much near enough. But if you do just use the built-in tools, just bear in mind that when it comes to exporting the data, before you do that, you will have to rename every area measurement you've created. And if you've got 3 or 4 very different area types, you're going to have to do a lot of renaming, and it's quite laborious. Whereas if you have a predefined tool, you can create them just before you're about to take off if you know what it is you want to take off. It's a lot speedier. Trust me on that. I've spent 4 or 5 years using Bluebeam, and it's definitely the best approach. What you can actually do is an example of that as well. If tools are quite similar, for instance, let's use this polyline as an example, where we've split it up into. We've obviously used it as a girth, a perimeter at the base of the building. Just supposing we wanted to change the name of it. So if we grab the name polyline by clicking on the markups list, we can go into the properties of the poly length, and you notice in the subject line it's called polyline. You notice in the toolbar it's called polyline, and in the markups list subject it's called polyline. I've just got this one selected. If I change that to base of perimeter as a measure, enter that, now you'll see the toolbox hasn't changed, the properties of the poly length have changed, and in the markups list it's created a separate entry for base of perimeter. So if I wanted to do that to all of them at the same time, I would just repeat the process, having selected them all. Be careful when you're doing this, because even a capitalisation or a space will kick it into its own category. So you've got to be quite accurate when naming. You notice they're all been changed to base of perimeter, and they've all been put into one markups list. One further handy thing you can do by way of annotating your work, and we will expand on this as we measure, you'll see the benefit of it. Just for the sake of differentiating between sections, as I said, you can annotate. So if we grab the first one, we can see on the screen which one it is, because the nodes have appeared, and we can actually go into this label section of the tool's properties and give it a name. Side of bay. I'm just using these as examples. This is not what you would actually do in a real world takeoff, but it helps, once you come to export your data, differentiate between items of the same measure but have slightly different properties in your takeoff. So rear of building, and you can see over here in the label that each one of those has, although it's a base of perimeter tool, it's got a separate annotation, so you can identify what you need by using the label. And again, you can grab all of them, or as many of them as you want, and just give them a name. Let's just call it front. I know they're not all the front, but front elevation. So it's another way of further annotating your tools, and it'll all make sense when we start to take off and we export the data into a spreadsheet. The aim being that grouping everything of a similar ilk together is quite important, otherwise you're all over the place. And just on a final note on that, Bluebeam will export your data in a particular order. If you just before you export, and we'll do this again when we actually do it, these column headings, if you click them, that is what it will filter this spreadsheet window by. So generally, if you notice, I've gone and filtered by label. I've now got a random set of markups that don't really mean a great deal. If they got put into a spreadsheet like that, it would make much sense. So make sure subject is your filter before you export. And as I say, when we do some exporting, I will explain that. So hopefully that's covered the differences between the tools, the toolboxes, so on and so forth. I'll answer any questions you have in the break before we resume.